Hi, I'm Spencer Sherry. I'm a Saratoga County-based filmmaker and a member of the 518 Film Network. I just got done interviewing Brit McAdams, who's the writer and director of the new Owen Wilson movie Paint, coming out on April 6th, and you can see it in Crossgates or in the AMC theaters in Saratoga. We got to talking about what it was like shooting in Saratoga, some of the cool locations they got to go to, the visual language that inspired the film, and what it was like basing a character off of Bob Ross, even though it's not Bob Ross. If you want to know more about the 518 Film Network and what we do, you can look us up on Facebook or Instagram. We have an event coming up called Cringe Fest, where filmmakers submit their cringiest first work and then some of their newer, better work. So that's April 15th down in Troy. Enjoy the interview.
Spencer's a local Saratoga filmmaker. I figure this would be a great
Cool.
chance for him to chat with you since you filmed in Saratoga. He just directed a Stephen King adaptation short film called The Monkey, and it's pretty dope.
Oh, that's awesome. Congratulations.
Thanks, man. I mean, congratulations to you. This looks like, is this your first feature?
Kind of. Wait, let's talk about The Monkey. Come on.
Okay.
So, and what's that from? Like, what in terms of book wise? It
Skeleton Crew. It's from his short stories in '85. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, I read his first 22 books. So, like I was really obsessed.
Wow.
And then it was, and then I had read too many. Like it was.
And
like,
then he shits a new one out every couple weeks, and it's like I can't keep up.
Oh, I mean, like I could never. Yeah, I don't know. I like that guy. That guy was. I learned so much about writing from him as a kid. Like it was I love that guy. I love his storytelling so much. And it's funny. I actually wrote like a horror short when I was like in my teens, I guess, because I was like, I know how to do this. And of course I didn't, but yeah. Oh, congratulations. That's amazing. You're able to do that.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it was a really cool, unique kind of backdoor opportunity where I kind of cold called his agent and left a very vague voicemail about who I was and what I wanted. And then when he ended up having to get back to me, I pitched it and he said no, and then I just kept saying please until he said yes. So, yeah, no, where it worked out. So we shot all last year locally as well, couple scenes in Saratoga, and then it's premiering in May up in Toga. So
man, that's awesome. Congratulations. That's a more interesting story than this in terms of pulling that off, getting no's and fighting to get a yes. That's awesome.
I appreciate it. Well, that's part of what I wanted to talk to you about is kind of where I know this was a long process, right? You wrote this like 13
Spencer,
years
why can't we keep talking about you?
I know. I'm just as trying to hot potato it as you are, I think. But
I'm sorry, I cut you off. What were you saying?
No, I just mean this. You wrote this 13 years ago, right? It's been in the works for a while.
Yes. Yeah. So I wrote it in 2010, and it made its way into the Blacklist, which is a list of sort of the highly regarded unproduced screenplays, and we got greenlit quickly, and we got fully financed, and I did a lot of dancing. I bought a round of shots for a bar, which I didn't realize at the time. If you buy a round of shots, people buy shots back. So it is a time bomb of a so it was an interesting night. That was my last time buying a round of shots.
Well, good to know that might be the secret. I should start saving up for whatever that tab was.
Oh no, it's funny. It wasn't bad because the server, she was like, if you wait 10 minutes, they're half price. And I was like, thank you. Thank you. So, but sadly, everyone else seemed to know that as well when they bought them back. So yeah, it took, it was like a, immediate success story. And then it just came together and fell apart for the next decade. So, for all sorts of reasons, but it's basically, you kind of have to build a corporation to get a movie off the ground in an independent world. So, and then, the good thing was it sort of, over those years, it got a lot better, which was the gift of it. Mike White, who's, his latest things are The White Lotus, but he was involved for a while, and then he just sort of he went just to work on his own stuff exclusively. But he was such a good person to have on board, where he was sort of like, this is going to get made when it's ready to be made. And he was right, because it's an exponentially better film because it failed for so long, and the world sort of changed, comedy changed, and the script changed with it, which was a gift. My way of thinking and my whole perspective on the world, just and my place in the world, has really evolved over the last decade. So we're just really lucky to fail for so long.
Sure. Yeah, I've only seen the trailer. It looks excellent, but that I do get the Mike White style of comedy. It seems that you're bringing to this. It's very dark humor.
Yeah,
It appears. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really hopeful, sweet movie, which
It's nice.
it's
Nice change of pace. Yeah.
yeah, it really is. It comes from a very different place. It's sort of I think that's sort of what it's doing, in terms of it's definitely got a Mike White thing to it, but it's also sort of in a world of, it's kind of like a it's hard to say what it is, but there's a little bit of sort of Napoleon Dynamite and Elf, and sort of but with Wes Anderson, sort of an understated version of those films. But it is a tragedy for Owen Wilson's character Carl Nargle, but it always comes from a good place, and there is love for all of the characters in it. And so I think that's also where it sort of resonates right now, where there just isn't a lot of positive stuff out there. There just isn't. Like, it's it's just a world of attacking, and this is not that place. So it's a PBS station in Burlington, Vermont, where his character, Owen Wilson's character Carl Nargle, is basically a rock star. He's had the #1 painting show on PBS Burlington for 22 years, and he's never had a reason to change, and everyone there sort of built their lives around him. So they, along with him, have not changed. And then a younger, better painter comes in and just sort of wrecks that world for him, and ultimately allows him to evolve beyond who he was as a rock star kid. So he would never get to that place, if not for getting kicked in the teeth a bit.
Sure.
But it all comes from a very good place. So yeah, and Owen's a really good guy to do that. Owen's super good at he's incredibly, comedically, he's just gifted. He's also a great actor, and he's a good guy, like, in terms of crew wise. Like, this from, you learn so much when before action is called. And so Owen, going through dailies and stuff where he's continually making sure the camera operator has a blanket to sit on or is comfortable. It's just that thing, like, you just see people for who they really are. So he's a legitimately good guy.
Was he attached from the beginning? Did you write this with him in mind, or?
No, he came on board about 5 years ago. So yeah, we got really lucky with him. And especially also because, he's an Oscar nominated writer. So just going through the script with him, and he's got a really interesting, I think, with writing, movies with Wes Anderson. If you think about those movies, those are completely unique characters. And they're also characters that aren't, when they could be, mean spirited or anything else, there's always there's a shift in whatever is going to happen in that movie, where it's not just purely down the rails mean or whatever. Like, they just have a really interesting take on characters and how their characters evolve. And it's really fun working with Owen on this, where that's where his mind goes on stuff. It's never anything rote. It's just I don't know, he's just a smart guy. Like, that's that's super helpful.
yeah Nice. How did that change? Like, how you mentioned that the script started off, 13 years ago. The world is different now, and I know that part of that is probably the popularity of the the Bob Ross type and figure. Now, with the internet coming back, people are more people can rewatch them, and I think that he's kind of grown a little bit of a following and an awareness in younger culture today. Is there anything else other than that technology, anything that kind of shifted the way this script got developed?
Yeah, I mean, the Bob Ross thing was a really interesting thing for me, where when I wrote it, he was not part of the zeitgeist. He was just not. And like the resurgence of Bob Ross has been, in some ways a gift to the film. But also it was sort of this thing that I sort of held a little precious to me, of having watched Bob Ross as a kid. And then, he just wasn't a thing when I wrote it. He just wasn't, like, all of the Bob Ross memorabilia and, merch, and like, it just wasn't a thing. So it's been interesting to watch him return to relevancy, and be so loved. So that's one aspect of it. The bigger thing in there was that originally the antagonist was male, and that was the biggest mistake of the script. Was it was two guys sort of leading the way in most ways, and it was I took a big swing in changing that late, and we were all ready to go, and I was like, this needs to change, like, it's just. And so it's really interesting. I feel like from the writing side of it, like, changing something big really gave the film its heart, and it allowed the female characters in it, which there are more female characters than male. I mean, I know you haven't seen it, but there are more female characters than male characters in this. And for a long time, I had all of the female characters being nice and kind of one-dimensional in that. Like, in some ways I was worried about what to do with characters, and then sort of as Me Too was coming in, or just sort of kind of starting to flood my brain and help me question every part of my life, I was sort of like, oh, I need to make these guys nicer, the women in it nicer, and they just got worse as characters. And so the switching the antagonist from male to female and really rewriting that character, and then it ended up rewriting the whole world, and ultimately allowed the female characters to be really flawed and get much more interesting. It was sort of like, it was just the script blossomed because of that. And they, like, the female characters really drive the whole world now. And it's it just, that's the gift. Like, that's the Mike White thing of, like, this will be made when it's ready to be made. And
Sure.
And I feel fortunate. I just feel lucky that the original version wasn't made. And because it's just so much better for it.
Yeah, it's funny how that changes over time. You look back at something even a couple months after writing it and go, oh, I think maybe a tweak here, maybe a thing there,
Oh yeah, I think universally I really hate my scripts. So if you want to see hate, watch me read an old script.
Yeah, fair enough. How's that? Yeah. How is that writing process like for you? I mean, is this a more of an outline that comes to you, or a specific scene? Where do you sit down and just start writing? What was the first scene that you wrote?
On this, I had a really good understanding of the end, which is really helpful. I had an understanding of the beginning and the end. So, and that having an end that to me feels super helpful. Like, that's, if I don't have an end, I don't know. I think it's like setting up the world. I mean, for me, like, I have very specific things that I go back to, which I can send you guys also if you want. If anyone has, like, I don't know, if anyone listens or has questions. My biggest things are, it's the 22 rules of story writing by Pixar, which are amazing, which is the biggest one in there is that you are interested when people are trying as opposed to succeeding, which is why sports films do so well. And you can't name a single sports film about a great team because it's boring.
Yeah.
Like, you want the little guy who's never done this, who can't do that, who's trying harder than anyone else. Then you're like totally on board. This little town from Hickory or what? It's just like, you're like, man, I can get behind these guys. So Pixar's really good at that. The idea of trying. So that's a big part. That's where trying, each character having a goal, a specific goal, is really big. And when people are writing, I know when I'm writing, and if I get to a dinner scene, say, and I'm just writing for the protagonist, I'll get stuck because the scene will die because I don't have anything else for the other people to want. So, you know, if you, and also with the want, it's the want and the need. So it's like, I want to be a rock star. I actually need love. And I think like a big example of that is, that I love is the first Rocky, where at the end of the first Rocky, he can't imagine winning. All he can imagine is going the distance. He just wants to go the distance, which is such a great goal to start. Like the idea that he could never win, but he just wants to go the distance, not get knocked out. And then at the end, you hear in the background that it's a split decision. You're like, holy cow, but it's in the background. And then you hear he loses, but what he's actually won is love. And so Adrian is in the ring. Paulie, his brother-in-law, is finally being nice and helpful and helps Adrian into the ring. So he's got his moment of like altruism. And then you've got Adrian coming in and them hugging, and it's a love story. So it's like, you know, you've got this whole fight thing just to tell a love story. And so that to me is like a huge part of it. It's like the want and the need. So, you know, you can set up the want, but ideally, if you, aside from sports movies, but most sports movies have this all, you know, aside from like getting away from the want to get to the need. So that's a big thing for me. And then, you know, where I think I'm working just on tangent after tangent here, but in the, you know, if you're, let's say you've got a dinner scene and you've got, you know, 4 people at a diner, and the protagonist, you know, you've got a clear goal for him. But if one person forgot his wallet or can't pay for the check and is in love with the girl, and the girl has an upset stomach and is in love with the guy, and the girl leaves and the guy's freaked out and because he can't pay, then all of a sudden that scene comes to life, as opposed to the protagonist sitting there thinking about how he's going to get into college or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
time I get stuck, that's the reason. And then the other one I really love is Matt Stone and Trey Parker from
South Park.
That's it. That's the name of that show that's been on for 30 years. So they have a great thing where they talk to NYU about having scenes that are but or therefore scenes and never and scenes. And that where it's every scene changes the world in some way. So it's like, this happens, but this changes, or this happens, therefore he has to go rob a bank, as opposed to like people at dinner and then they go home. Like, it's like they don't have and scenes, which is why their stuff is so tight. So, and that's a little bit hard to do a lot of the time, but I know for me, if I have a lot of and scenes, it's, if stuff isn't moving forward continually, then it gets boring. So that's a big part. Like that's the other one I love in there. But yeah, those are always sort of the things that I look for, or anytime I get stuck, it's for those. That's the problem. Those are the problems typically, is it's sort of and scenes and not having characters who have clear goals and wants and needs. So it's like that. And then also having an ending, having an ending. And then I think the big thing also for me there is, if you have an ending in any of your cheats or any of your big things at the end, if you can drop those in early, have a reference to them, you can get away with murder in your third act. Just where you, because nothing, if it doesn't come out of the blue, if you've already established something, like this guy doesn't know how to whistle, and then at the end he finally whistles to get the dog to save the world or whatever, like just set it up early, you know, be like, oh, I can't date a guy who can't whistle, and then at the end the guy whistles and the dog doesn't get hit by a train, and you're like, holy cow. Like, it's, as opposed to just the guy whistling at the end and then the dog, you know, doesn't get hit by the train. It's like throwing in little simple stuff.
Yeah.
After you write the end, is throwing simple stuff at the beginning, and you look a lot smarter than you are.
Sure. Well, that's a classic example. The dog.
The dog.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We've all seen that.
How many times have we seen that?
Yeah.
How many times? I'll give you a really good example of that, which is in Chinatown, there is a scene at the end where spoiler alert, the woman in it gets she drives away from a scene at the very end in Chinatown. She's driving away, and the police fire at the car, and you hear the horn hit. The horn goes off, and the car sort of goes in the curb. So the reason that makes sense is because she has sort of an illogical freak out like 30 or 40 minutes into the film where she bangs her head on the horn of the car on the steering wheel and hits the horn. And so you're like, oh, that's what it looks like. And that's the sound when her head hits the horn. And it kind of doesn't make sense there. And then at the end, you see that car get shot and you hear the horn, you're like, she's dead. And you don't have to show it or anything else. Like, and everyone's reaction tells the story, but it's just a car going off, and it's an incredible end that doesn't make sense if she doesn't hit her head on the steering wheel halfway through. So yeah, I think that's a big part of all of that is setting up that stuff. And it's not that hard to do as long as when stuff doesn't make sense at the end, put it in early and it will set up your end.
Yeah, and that's also the rule of show don't tell, right? I mean, with just filmmaking is the less dialogue I can have, the better.
Yeah, for sure. I think yes, and to think visually. So that was a big tip I got early on from the guy who created Beavis and Butthead, where he was like, you need to think visually. Like if you're stuck, think visually. So go to a place like I mean, Taika Waititi, he's like, he says like, I can tell if something's written versus if it's if they came up with it in the moment. But it's like, it's a joke with a weird pillow that's on the couch. Like, go to where you're shooting, and if there's like a weird shaft of light that comes in at a certain point of day, be like, oh, if God can just give me a signal, and then all of a sudden it's like, you've got something there. So yeah, you have to think visually everywhere. It's and for the most part, another really good one, which is a super old reference. All my references are like 80 years old. But
you're dating yourself, yeah.
Oh, trust me. Well, I mean, if you can see me, I'm dating myself. But Diner, which is an old movie, was the first movie to have people like talking over each other. But it's really, really good for like hearing how people actually speak. I mean, for the most part, a normal conversation is you and me like cutting each other off, right? Like we don't finish stuff. So that's the way people talk normally. And the more you can work that in, the better, just in terms of, the feel of a world.
It sounds natural to the ear. And
yeah. Look, and also like, I mean, it's an affirmation. It's also like, it's so great because it's also, I'm dismissing your agreeing by agreeing over you, because ultimately then I get to run it like that. I'm like, it's dude,
like a power kind of
1000%. Like I just want to agree with you, like, because it is really it's a male. The males do that, a lot more because it's that you agree with someone just so they're not teaching you anything new also, but it is the flow of conversation. Now you can't cut me off because I really put you in a corner here.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great segue too into as far as the visual language of this film. I mean, how long had you been working with the DP that you worked with? How much post-production did you have, and how did you kind of come up with, I mean, this Bob Ross, very important kind of visually in the style and what you're doing. And from the trailer, I mean, it looks like extremely colorful and vibrant. How long did you guys work at figuring out what that visual language was going to be for this?
I had a long time to think about it. So for me, I put together a lookbook and had that for about a decade. So a lookbook is where it's just screenshots of various characters, or especially characters and worlds. So that really helped to set a tone for everyone as we started talking about it, as people from each department. Like it was a really good, jumping off place. The things, the cinematographer is my old friend Patrick Cady, who it may be the last thing he ever shoots, and he did it as a favor. So he's off with J.J. Abrams now directing stuff. So he's a flat out genius and a good guy and a good friend. So we did like a movie together called Trivia Town, which is about the world's largest trivia contest, which is a doc where we shot 450 hours of footage. So don't ever do that.
Wow.
Because that's like, just watching.
That's a cautionary tale if I've ever heard one. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, don't do it. It feels really easy to shoot a doc until you have to edit it.
Until you have to edit it and go through every single frame. Yeah. No thanks.
Oh, just crazy, horrible. But he and I, in terms of the sort of visual language in terms of how we shot it. We had 20 days to shoot it, and we had 12-hour days with travel during COVID. So those are short days. And so the people we ripped off the most were the Coen brothers in terms of how they shoot, which is they shoot primarily, we shot a ton of singles. So, and singles really help. So we had a lot of the frames we're looking at now, you know, you and me clean. And we shot mostly with a 27 millimeter, sometimes a 32, but at 27 is really nice for us. We called that the Nargle, which is Owen's name of the film, but we'd be like put on the Nargle. But that's what's really nice about that lens is it gives you, you know, it's like you can feel hands, and you can feel you know, the camera pushing in just a little bit gives you a lot of information, and really changes the world as it pushes in on people. So it's a really good comedic lens. And yeah, it just became the world for us. We shot singles, so where you would have a single, which is just a person on their own, versus a dirty shot where you have a piece of someone else in. And so in shooting singles, it's much easier. Clean singles, it's much easier to edit anything. Like you can just cut for sound. Basically, you can cut for sound the whole way and just show someone else's face if you're cutting between two takes. Like, so you can take sound from two takes and just stay on one person's face as they're listening to the other person, and then it's seamless. So if you have it dirty where you have a piece of someone else in it, it gets much harder to cut between those two takes. So we knew we didn't have much time. So that was our world in terms of the Coen brothers do that a lot. And I love what it does for characters too. Like it makes people feel very alone a lot of times. And you get a lot of information about a person. The other thing we really did was it's as much Wes Anderson as we could like work in. So I love symmetry in a frame. We're tight for time, so our best frames have symmetry, and then there are other frames where we just couldn't be as precious. I mean, Wes Anderson, you know, watching his films, I gasp at his frames. You know, I'll laugh out loud, and when the shot comes up, it's so good. So at our best, we are at his most unremarkable. You know, like that we really tried for that. In terms of the visual look, Carl Nargle, Owen's character, is trapped in the past. So the whole film is trapped in the past. There's a warmth to it, a lot like a Bob Ross painting or the paintings he paints. So it's a very warm, there are lots of earth tones, oranges and browns. For anyone out there who's making a film, I would say and especially if you have no money, the easiest production design you can do is to cut down in your colors. So just make it 3 colors, like just choose 3 colors, and all of a sudden you have a look. So it's like, if you have, you know, for us, it was like, we had some denim, we had denim in there, and then we had oranges and greens, not so much greens, browns, some yellows. So it's like, if you can cut down on your world, if you can cut down on your colors, you get an instant production value for nothing. So it's like, that was a big thing for us, was and having everything. So everything united in our palette. Todd Jeffrey, who's the production designer, who's done things like Miracle Workers and other really specific shows and movies, was just so good at, he's one of those guys who there's just an absolute shorthand instantly between the two of us, where, you know, we'll talk through something and then he'll be like, I got you. Like, he'll be like, I'll figure it out. And then he would absolutely figure it out. So we were also like, one of the things, like production cars, especially during COVID, you know, and where we were in Saratoga, like getting cars is super expensive, like picture cars. So we rented our cars off of Craigslist. All but one. There's a van that's called Vantastic. That's a hero of the film. So Vantastic, I own. It's sitting in a barn in Rutland right now, Rutland, Vermont, but where my sister lives. But our other cars were, you know, we needed specific cars from the 70s and 80s primarily, and that's super expensive to, you know, for if you're looking to do it the real way. So we would find stuff on Craigslist and be like, hey, can we rent your car for 2 weeks for $200? We'll give it a tune up and return it in better shape. And, people are like, trying to sell a beater, and they're like, perfect.
Yeah.
So, it was a very, it saved us, thousands and thousands on each of those. So like that was a really, that's sort of part of it. It also meant that Owen helped push cars. But it's also, it also sets a tone where you're like, we're going to figure this out. And, if everyone sees, him pushing a car, they're like, I can probably not complain about lunch.
Yeah.
But so, and then the other who really set the look was Ali Pierce, who did the costume design. And on that, we had sort of Bob Ross as the obvious reference, but the other one is Gordon Lightfoot, who's got a great song in it, which is If You Could Read My Mind, which is just one of my favorite songs ever, which we're amazing, so lucky to get. But that sort of rock star, there's a timeless rock star look to him. And he was a rock star in the 70s, which is sort of where Owen's character forever lives. So that was the other visual reference, was a very specific reference to Gordon Lightfoot. So it's sort of a combination of those things, and you set a tone early, and then you let people who are much more talented at stuff run with it. So the wardrobe that the costumes that Ali put together are, it's for whatever my basic understanding of wardrobe of that time, she just amplifies that. And Todd is so much better with production design. So it's like you have a conversation, then you let him go off and do a better job of it than you. Like there's a custom made sofa bed in the back of his van, and Todd was super excited to show me the fabric that he had for it. And but it was the inside part of the fabric. It was like the part of the fabric you're not supposed to use. And he was like, look at this. I'm gonna put the couch in this fabric, and isn't it amazing? And it's like, I never ever would have thought of that. Like I never would have that idea. So it's like, that's because he's way better at that than I would ever be. So it's, taking advantage of people as much as you can, and then you take credit for it, really is the thing you want to do.
That's the trick. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the trick.
Would you say that that's kind of the leap between, the television world that it seemed like you thrived in for a very long time, and then now directing your first feature and getting to work with department heads and getting to work, as you said, with people that know a lot more than you do about what should be going on. What was your experience in that regard, jumping into kind of this film for the first time?
Well, it's, there's so much more information that needs to be communicated. So as much as you can have, you need to have reasons for everything. And I'll say, like, I've come from shooting commercials that had much, much higher budgets per day. So it's like, I've had the choice of, a kid's going to hold a ball. Here are the 70 red balls. Which one do you want? Which is a really hard decision to make. You spend forever picking a ball that no one cares about once you actually start shooting. Like that's the other side of like actually having money, is like, that's the other side. You're like, oh boy, you got to pick one of these 70 balls. Well, let's narrow it down to 30. It's like, it's just,
yeah, in a way, it's almost better to have less and then just go off of necessity.
Yeah. Cause then it's like, you care about what actually matters. So, I would say it was interesting talking with, Jake Martin, who's the AD on it, who shoots a lot of stuff with, first time directors, like, and me being a first time feature director. I've done 2 other features and then done a lot of commercials and TV and stuff. So it's like, I've spent a lot of time on set. So I'm someone who's, versed in shooting, but, he was talking about how often the directors he worked with wouldn't have a script and wouldn't write notes on a script. Like, for me, it's like and the same thing with Patrick Cady, who is, he's directed episodes of Bosch, and then now is with J.J. Abrams, and he's done a lot of, really like successful TV as a DP and then as a director. But for me, it's like I have a clipboard with the pages for the day, and then I also have a whole script near me in case you need to reference something. But you need to be able to explain every word and also understand the arc for every actor and what you're shooting out of order. So it's like what the scene is before and what the scene is after. And if you don't have an explanation for every single word, you're in trouble. So because at some point someone's going to be like, well, do they say and here? And you're like, oh, I don't know. So you just
And they're
have
like,
to
well, you
like,
wrote it.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the best
Yeah.
part. That's the really good part. Like, yeah, it was even like, it was funny because it was like on one point at the near the very end, like Michaela Watkins, who's awesome and really great. I mean, in every sense of the word, and a wonderful person, incredible actor. But there was this one line at the end where it was she like, I was like, she was like, and so I say that, I'm like, yeah. And she is like, and I'm like, I haven't come up with a better line there. And she was and she was sort of like, you wrote it. And I was like, I know, but it's like, it's also like, it's like 4 pages from the end. And it's like, you rewrite a script from page one typically. And it was like one of those things I just never got to it. And we ended up figuring it out there. But it was like, that was the one thing where I was like, it was actually the only line in the whole thing where I wasn't happy with the line. And it was one word, it was literally one word. And it was such a funny moment where she was like, you wrote it. I'm like, I know. Like I had no reason for it. But so you just have to, like, you really have to have an understanding and explanation for every beat. And then you also need to be prepped and have, if you're shooting, have your script with your notes on it and your reason for everything. That's also something I do on scripts is I cheat, which and it's hard, it's different where if you're a writer director, but everyone makes such a big deal of like, don't put in any screen direction or anything in a script. If you're, directors will get mad if you're a writer and you do that. I'm like, I don't care. I want this to make sense. So it's like, I'll put in like, she's never been sadder, like, and it's like, why not? Like, it's like, she walks away laughing and then, and she's never been sadder. Like, I read Coen Brothers scripts and I have no idea if they're funny or good or anything else because they don't put that in. Like, I'm like, I don't know, is this funny? And then you see it, you're like, oh, that's genius.
It's hysterical. Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. But you have literally, I don't understand them. Like, and but they do. So, but I think if you're trying to sell a script or make something, like, it's so much easier when you're shooting if you're like, someone's like, oh, I love you, and it's like secretly they hate him or whatever, like, and just put it in, like, who cares? Like, just like,
you're trying to communicate what's happening, then just
and then all of a sudden and like, you're not supposed to do it. But if you're working with an actor and they're like, so, and they read it and then they're not going like, oh, do I really love him or do I hate him? It's like, no, it says right there you hate him. So that's like, it's weird because
it's almost like doing a little bit of work in the beginning than rather having to go through this lengthy pre-production thing where you're explaining a character and you're trying to figure out what's happening. It's like
all of it. Yeah. And even like shooting where it'd be like, boy, really, that was genius. And then I look at the script and be like, oh, it's in there. And I don't mean that like saying that what I did was like genius in the least, but it's like, it's just those things. It's such a weird thing. I think it's such a weird thing in screenplays where you're not supposed to put that stuff in. Like, where it's insulting to the director if you do write more than the words or whatever. But I just think it's super helpful. Like, it's
it all starts with story. It's like,
ideally
you have a director attached that likes and gets the story. And so
and also, if you're going to sell a screenplay, the clearer it is, just make it
right
understandable for someone reading it. Because and even like, I'll do things where I'll say like, you introduce 10 characters in the first 6 pages, and then come page 15, people are like, I have no idea who Marjorie is. So I'll put in, parenthetically, like, Marjorie, the lead cheerleader, grabs a knife or whatever. Like, just remind people, like, remind them so they don't, because people have to go back and check. And anytime someone disengages, that's not helpful. So, that's another cheat that I'll put in, just remind people who people are, because why not?
Yeah. How many, this is kind of a self-validating question, but how many times a day did you put down that clipboard and have to go find it?
Never. Well, this is the best part. That's a good question. So I did lose the clipboard on one day, and then we were so small, like, in terms of our production staff, that it was sort of like, someone can get you a clipboard, but they won't be here to serve lunch or something like that. It was sort of like, I was like, okay. So Patrick, Katie made, I made a, I made a clipboard out of cardboard and just had like clips on the top for that day. And I was like double, and I did 2 pieces of cardboard together and just did clips. And I was like, it works. And so Patrick on the back of it drew a picture of me and then wrote in like big letters, like, big time director. on the back as I'm holding this cardboard
Perfect.
clipboard.
I was just so nice. I had to give it shot list script on a clipboard. I had to give it to somebody else. I'm like, your only job is to not let me lose this. Just be around so I can go, where's my shot list? And then they'll come running
funny.
up. Yeah, it's you put it down. I worked with another director on a short recently, did the same thing. He would just have the pages and then he would just put them down and then go about his thing. And then he would up and then it's gone. And now we're behind like 5 minutes every single time that happens.
Interesting. Yeah. I think I never put it down. I used to do, the dumb thing I used to do is I used to fold the script and put it in my back pocket. And so I would have like a folded up script in my back pocket, and then it would be like flip. You could never get to the pages right, or like you'd be writing notes like that were all messy, you know, like because you wouldn't. So
at least you have it. Clipboard's just so bulky. It's like I don't know what to do.
I don't know. Do not talk negatively about my clipboard. I love my clipboard, and I won't let it go. I think you.
Well, yours is a cardboard, so you could fold it up.
Well, yeah, exactly. But I think you need to reassess your relationship with your clipboard, and maybe if you appreciated it more, it wouldn't leave you. So
okay, maybe I should have a drawing of me on the back. Maybe that'll help.
Yeah, just write big time director.
Yeah. How that also kind of brings me to this area, but how much actual painting do you do, or did you? Has Bob Ross ever inspired you in that kind of way, or?
No.
I know that's a
next question.
Easy softball question. But...
Next question. No. It's funny. I have my computer propped up right now on my mom's painting set, which is like, it's really neat. When we got stuff, it was you know, in terms of propping out the shoot, everything was very familiar from like my mom having painted when I was a kid. So it was fun to see like the same palettes and stuff. But no, I don't paint. And not that I'm against it in any way, but I can
anti-paint.
I'm not anti-paint. I'm just pro not learning how to paint because there's so many. I just have too many other things I'm behind.
I feel like starting from the bottom too. It's like, am I really? Yeah. How much time am I going to spend crawling my way up in this discipline? You know.
Yeah, I'm so bad at so many other things that I need to be better at. So you know, I need to stay in the deck. But Owen took painting lessons. Like Owen can really paint, which is great. Like he had some Bob Ross certified teachers. He also had David Arquette was his teacher for a bit, which is pretty great. Yeah. But he can really paint, and which is super, super helpful. Like it's, you know, he that guy takes things seriously. And so he learned how to paint. So it was, you know, you need a close up if in painting, and he's painting. So it's great. Yeah.
Even minuscule things like that and just body language and technique, I'm sure.
Oh my goodness. Especially good, and also because he's a lefty. So it's like, that's the thing. Yeah. So it's like, oh, we need a lefty artist, you know, to do this, you know, or whatever. Like just little things like that add up. So, you know, on his own, he learned how to paint for this, you know, which is also, you know, one of the reasons he's so good at stuff.
Sure.
Because the commitment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the channeling the Bob Ross energy too, something I wanted to ask was, you know, it's overtly based on Bob Ross, but it's not Bob Ross. And so I wanted to know kind of how did you fly a little too close to the sun as far as like some of the licensing stuff goes, or is this all like under parody, or how do you manage that?
It's under parody, and it's an interesting thing when you talk to lawyers about stuff, because our PBS station is the Public Broadcasting Syndicate, and so it's a different PBS, and they're like, that's like no,
and that counts. That's close enough, far enough away. No problem.
And his name is Carl Nargle. It's not the same person.
Where did that come from? We got to talk about that. That is a very Coen Brothers name. I will give
it is. Yeah. That's a compliment. So Nargle is based on, I live in LA now, but I went to Colgate, which is near where you guys are. And so one of my good friends there was Marty Nagel. And so Marty Nagel was called Nargle by another one of our friends who was from Pennsylvania, sort of raw, and Marty would sort of raw a little bit, like, so he'd call him Nargle. So
it's the classic, just bastardize the
exactly
name a little bit and call it a nickname. Yeah.
You're 18, so it's, you know, Kevin Gray becomes Boo Boo. Yeah, it's so like, I love that period of my life where there's one guy. I was a kicker for Colgate a long time ago, and so one day lunch between football practices, this one guy had an ice pack on his shoulder for one lunch. To this day, he is called Quasimodo. Like, he's called Quas. Like, for one day. Like, it's like one day, and then that's your whole life after that.
Yeah.
Like, Paul Hamada. Nope, it's Quas. So it's like so Marty, it's Marty Nargle, and then the other side of that was when I was a youngster. Another one of my friends who was a very tall, big defensive lineman on that team. We were in our early 20s, and we had booked a spin class with a bunch of other people had convinced us to take a very early spin class, which we decided to not go to bed before. And so his name is Chris Brown, but we had to wear stickers, and he wore a sticker that said Carl. He put on a sticker that said Carl, and he was in the back of a spin class. He was behind me, and just to hear the instructor try to encourage Carl, who had not slept in a bit, and it was a very, very large person. I mean, come on, Carl, push it off the saddle, Carl. Like, it was one of the funniest things in my life to hear that for like an hour and never even look back to see what was happening with Carl.
All knowing, not even close to his real name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of those two. It's, Carl Nargle is, it's for the dumbest reasons. And a lot of the, there are other characters in there who are my sister's Alexander Moore, my brother-in-law is Donald Moore, Brian Hoffman is an old friend, Jay Fogarty, who sells Mountain Mist gelato in Saranac Lake, is in there. So it's and it's funny talking to, I just named everyone basically after old friends. And but yeah, even like it's fun talking to Owen about a script where he'll be like, I was talking with, Marjorie Tenenbaum, and she was like, or just you're like, all those, it's so much fun hearing where all of those names come from, because it's just friends, which I think it's like, 1000% name characters after your friends. It's so much fun.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter. It's just the name.
I take like the last names. I'll just lift the last name, and then that way, if I ever get noticed for anything and anyone's watching any of the stuff that I make, no one can make a direct like, that's my name and he took my name. So I'll slap a Jeff or something in front of it.
I think I just opened myself up to lawsuits across the board.
I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I did want to ask. I've been living in Saratoga for the last 2 or 3 years, and so I just wanted to get your opinion on the town. What was your favorite on-camera location, and what was your favorite off-camera location?
Well, first, I just love Saratoga. Like, I really talk up Saratoga. I think it's that unique. It's a unique place, and like, I mean, I grew up like an hour north of New York City and went to Colgate. My sister lives in Rutland, so it's sort of like I've triangulated Saratoga in my life. But I think that the unique aspect of having all of the horse track money there, so you get super fancy, like you get great restaurants and stuff, but also it's pretty empty for a lot of the time. Like, it's just those 2 months where it's, which I haven't been to since I was a kid. But so I think it's sort of the best of both worlds, where you have really beautiful stuff that's not getting used for most of the year.
Yeah, I agree. As someone not in the traditional Saratoga tax bracket, it's nice to have all those nice the amenities by me. But I live in Greenfield Center, which I heard that I think you shot at a barn in. Like 10 minutes outside.
That's where that barn is. That's the name of that.
Greenfield Center. Town.
Okay, that's Mark owns that barn, and he's it's so nice shooting there. Like, I mean, that barn is amazing, in his house. And but it's like, we needed to get the van delivered for a shot, 6 months after we shot, and Mark signed for the van and took the keys and, locked it up and hid the keys for me. And I came picked it up at his house. Like, it's like that level of everything there. So it's, so appreciative to shoot there with everyone being so nice, and, in no ways jaded about production. They haven't been taken advantage of before. Like, they had their house wrecked. Cause that does happen, with production. You're like,
they'll come take over.
Yeah. And they're rude. And, a lot of times where it's like, oh, where are the baseboards of my living room? You know, it's like or the molding or whatever. You're like, what happened? So we were nice to people also, but people were great to us there. In terms of favorite locations, the barn is great. Our locations are really, really great. I would say the Saratoga Baths is the Burlington Museum of Art, and that was our first day, and that's our most sort of Wes Anderson-y look. That was an absolute gift to us. That location's pretty spectacular. And especially you'll appreciate this, but we shot on the second floor, which has skylights, and it was overcast. So we needed to shoot a lot that day, and not having to light in there it's all white walls and white floors. And so that was super, super helpful. That's a great place. I mean, we have really neat houses. All of our houses are great. Carl's house is pretty remarkable. The owner of that was really nice to us, and all of our, I don't know. I really love the look of the film, and Saratoga was such a huge part of, we had variations of everything. It's playing Vermont in the movie, so it did a really nice job in that role. Should be
close enough. I go up to Vermont. We're like, I've been through Rutland. We have friends in Rutland. I'm actually wearing a Stratton sweatshirt right now.
Yeah.
Never skied, but
no,
I grew up like Oneonta, Cooperstown area.
Yeah.
And so it's just nowhere near a mountain. And I had younger triplet siblings. And so my parents were not too keen on how far away can we make our activities.
Triplets.
Yeah,
Man,
big time.
Yeah. Go in the yard. Go in the yard.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, go play in the yard. Yeah. Just
That's
waiting for me to
impossible.
get old enough to drive. That way they can just totally remove they're coming and going to school. Yeah, for sure. Do you have any kids?
7-year-old and 10-year-old. So how about you?
Nope, none. I have my girlfriend has a very sleepy bulldog, 11-year-old bulldog, and that's kind of the extent of my child rearing stepfather capabilities.
Well, let's get you some kids and get you skiing, and we'll just take it from there.
Yeah, it sounds great. Yeah, I'll see you up in Rutland.
Exactly.
Well, hey, thank you very much, Brit, for taking the time to talk to us. This has been great. I've heard nothing but good things about the production coming through Saratoga. I think that you said it too. That's why our network, our kind of 518 Film Network, that's why we like it up here in the Capital Region, is because of that kind of community vibe of everyone is just excited when you tell them you want to make a movie and want to use their stuff for location. And it's like that's a different feeling than being in New York or LA in the oversaturated,
Yeah, we loved being there. So I'm a big fan of the 518. You guys it was great. It was awesome. Like I love Saratoga in general. So if it wasn't such a positive experience with all you guys, I would not feel that way about Saratoga. So I love Saratoga. So I'm super appreciative of everyone who worked on the film who's there. Just could not feel luckier to shoot in a place.
Yeah, well, we're really excited about it. We're excited to see it. Appreciate you taking the time to come out. It was really great meeting you, and best of luck and congratulations on all of the success. I'm excited to see it. April 7th is when it comes out, right?
Yep. Yep. So, and it's playing in Saratoga, which is great. And then in Albany and sort of around. So, and good luck with you and your Stephen King journey. That sounds amazing. I can't wait to see it.